To begin, let us define what we mean by navigation. Unlike traditional RL, in which an agent has access to a global map of its environment, the agent in our task is forced to navigate on the basis of its egocentric localized representation of the environment. This form of navigation can be broken down into two smaller subcategories, path integration and vector-based navigation. Path integration allows the agent to self-localize based on internal cues, and vector-based navigation enables it to estimate the displacement vector between its current state and the goal state. There's been a lot of work related to these tasks, but navigation is still a considerable challenge for deep reinforcement learning agents, who fail to outperform mammalian navigational abilities. Drawing inspiration on the biological structures in rodents, Bonino et al. Set out to develop a deep reinforcement learning agent with mammal-like navigational capabilities. In their work, Bonino et al. Mimic the neurological processes underlying a rodent's ability to self-localize from ego motion information with the use of an RNN. Grid cells are thought to provide rodents with the ability to compute positional and directional information based on input from place cells and head direction cells. When visualized, the neural firing patterns of grid cells form a hexagonal shape termed gridness, which the authors seek to reproduce with an LSTM trained on a combination of place cell, head direction cells, and the velocity of a simulated rodent. They hypothesize that these representations improve the performance of an agent in goal-directed navigation. We test this by recreating the proposed architecture and testing its efficiency on the classic Morris water maze. Drawing on results found by Sorcher et al., we experiment with modifications to this architecture. Lastly, we compare grid-based representations with other popular feature encoding strategies like tile coding. We investigate previous studies that show grid cells to provide a Markovian state representation for goal-directed navigation by replacing the policy LSTM from Bonino et al. With a simple linear actor-critic framework.
Here is the original architecture proposed by Bonino et al. It is this bottleneck layer that is shown to have grid-like structures of the environment. As training progresses, there are two kinds of patterns that emerge in the grid self-representation, hexagonal and orthogonal. Further work shows that these patterns depend on non-negativity constraints in the model. One of our key discoveries is that the LSTM is not environment agnostic. This goes in the opposite direction of Bonino's findings. An LSTM pre-trained on one target ensemble does not perform well on another target ensemble. To overcome this and get better generalization, we trained the LSTM with several sets of targets and layers, switching them during training. The training performance got worse, but we didn't see any improvement when using this enhanced LSTM with a new target ensemble. This experiment showed us that we have to train the LSTM jointly with the desired place and head direction cells. Here is the evolution of the grid-like representation during the 2000 epochs of training. We can see the two patterns previously mentioned, first orthogonal, then hexagonal. This experiment allowed us to confirm that grid cells provide a symmetric spatial representation of the environment. We wanted to test out Sorcher's et al. Hypothesis that adding a non-negative constraint would produce hexagonal patterns. Therefore, we added a value activation function to the LSTM hidden cells. However, we saw the opposite result as the one stated. We only observed orthogonal patterns and no hexagonal ones. This was true for both DeepMind and water maze environments.
One of the key findings of our project is the role of the environment in the task of path integration. We initially believed the path integration task is model agnostic, so our original experimentation involved training on the square DeepMind's environment that you can see on the left side of the slide, and then testing the agent on a circular water maze environment that you can see on the right side of the slide. However, when we experiment using the pre-trained path integration module, we found this to have significantly higher error than that of a fully trained LSTM. We generated a series of trajectories within the water maze environment and retrained the LSTM on the new training set. Thereafter, we used a trained LSTM network to perform the navigation task in the water maze. In order to judge the agent's ability to generalize to new target, we used the classical reference memory water maze task, or RMW task, where the goal location was fixed for 70% of the time, and after which it was moved to the opposite quadrant. A biological agent, like the rat, is able to quickly realize the change in the goal location and accordingly adjust its policy or behavior in subsequent days or sessions. This slide shows the escape latency for actor critic agent on RMW task. We are using a linear actor critic where the critic learns a mapping from feature space to value function, and the actor would learn a mapping from the current feature representation to action preferences. We also did application experiments by training the agent with and without goal memory. As a result, for all the feature encoding strategies, the agent is unable to adapt to the new goal location. As can be seen in the plot here, both the place cell and tile coding agents require a longer time to match their performance to before the goal was shifted in day 7. However, the grid code agent is able to adjust quickly to the new goal position in the environment and therefore doesn't suffer from the interference of its previously experiences. The escape latency for grid code agents is larger as compared to other agents. However, since LSTM outputs are noisy representation of position as opposed to place cells and tile codings, comparing the absolute values of escape latency is not a fair comparison. And in order to compare the absolute values of escape latency, we would need to inject noise in place cells and tile codings. The main key findings of our project is as follows. First of all, the path integration module is not environment agnostic. Second, even though there are some grid cells with hexagonal firing patterns, but there are far less than the grid cells with orthogonal firing patterns. Furthermore, we find out the grid code agents are able to adjust to new shift in the goal position much quicker as compared to place cell agent and tile coding agents. And this is indicating the flexibility of the vector-based navigation framework. And finally, we did some ablation experiments where the agents had no memory of the previously encountered goal. And basically the agents was unable to adjust to new changes in the goal location.